We know there are kids showing up at kindergarten not ready, but they hadn't qualified for early step services, and there had been no services for them, yet they were showing developmental delays. And so we proposed in our funding proposal that we also include a component of developmental intervention. Being that allied health services, physical occupational speech therapy services, there's a shortage nationwide, just like there is in childcare. Early intervention is so important. In 6-month time frame, so much is happening in the child's brain that we want to capitalize on. 13 to 15% of our population has an intellectual or developmental disability. So you would expect that many infants and toddlers would need early intervention services. Throughout Florida, we were hitting that 4% of children.
Welcome to The Critical Window, Brain Building in the First 3 Years. Join us in discussing how parents, healthcare professionals, experts in early childhood development, and community agencies can support a child's first 3 years of development. We unpack the science and share practical strategies for giving every child the best possible start.
So before we get started, I'd like for you to just share, I know we've done some work together, but if you'll just share, what is Art Gateway? And then specifically, I want to get into Help Me Grow and the work that you're doing here. So how does that fall under the umbrella?
Sure, you go first. So, Art Gateway, years ago would have been known by the term Association for Retreat Citizens. Just hearing that terminology, you can see why we are the ARC. Many years ago, we actually had our adult clients who advocated for the legislature to take the R word out of all legislation in Florida, and they were successful. And so we rebranded around 2016 and became the ARC, capital A with the lowercase r and c, kind of fits with our national as well. And our emphasis is to provide services to individuals, children and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, or in our children's case, those who may be at risk but not identified with a disability yet.
Wonderful. Okay. And so as we get into Help Me Grow, you can see how that will fall underneath that Art Gateway. So before we get any further along, if you don't mind introducing yourself, the role that you serve here, and then maybe a little bit about your background, what led you to the role that you're serving. That's a long story.
I'm MaryAnn, Bickerstaff. I'm Director of Children's Services with the Art Gateway. Our children's program is called Pearl Nelson Center, named after the founder of our agency. Mrs. Nelson had a son with Down syndrome who was born in the late 1940s. And there was no legislation for special education at that time. And she said, my son can learn. I know that he can. So actually on this same block that we're located on in a small center block building, she and a few other parents created what was called the Peter Pan School back then, thinking of that aspect of their all kind of remain childlike, is what their thought was. And then by 1954, she created the first charter Association for Retarded Children, which we've come full forward to today, where we are the ARC. And Gateway actually comes from a former mayor. Mayor Vince Woods used to talk about Pensacola being the gateway into Florida. And he had this cute little poem that I can't recite about that. And so we are the ARC that introduces you into Florida. I was in special education at University of West Florida. And I was in some classes to actually become a classroom teacher or a special ed teacher, and did a few practicums. And I was like, gosh, I'm not feeling as great about this as I had thought, but I'm going to stick with it, with those couple of practicums. And then at one of my courses, the director of Pearl Nelson Center came and spoke and talked about that they were doing preschool program for children 3 to 5. And they also had just a few years before that started an early intervention program where they were meeting families at Sacred Heart's neonatal intensive care unit and then following up to make home visits with infants and toddlers and mamas and daddies. And I thought, what? You can work with little ones that age. You can make a home visit and work with the parents. And I fell in love with the concept and scheduled that day to have a meeting with her. Went and spoke with my advisor at the university and said, is there a track where I could do this? And my degree actually go to that. And UWF had a track under special education called habilitative science, which allowed you to work before school age or with the adult population. And so I switched to that track and was able to get an internship at the Pearl Nelson Center. It was right towards the end of my education, so just had a couple of semesters. So while I was doing that internship, they got a grant funding to add another developmental specialist to their team. And that was I was finishing up in the fall semester, and so that was ending in December. Did the interview and was able to be hired on as a developmental specialist. The program was growing from just serving children birth to 1 to now going up to age 3. And so they had 2 developmental specialists, and there were more children being identified, so they had funding to add a 3rd. So that brought me to the agency, and I've never, ever been able to leave. Just been my passion all along. Over the years, the fun thing has been we've moved up and down the street into different buildings here as we have grown and changed. We added the pediatric therapy component in the 1980s. And first it was just speech, and then we added physical therapy, and then we were able to get occupational therapy. And around 2000, we moved into the building we're presently in, which looks like a pre-K building.
Yeah, we'll take some pictures so everybody can see an episode.
And our executive director at the time was like, let's do an inclusive child care, which I knew nothing about starting a child care business, and it was evident. But we wanted to still focus on our age population of children birth to 5. And so that was what our child care was. We operated that for 10 years, but it was a black hole of funding that it was really taking away the losses that we were incurring with that from our primary mission of doing those pediatric early intervention services. While it was fun, our staff are always young and having babies, and so they got to have their children be present in the building, and we did have a beautiful, inclusive environment. But I was then able to fill those classrooms with pediatric therapy spaces. We just expanded our therapies because there has always been this tremendous need and not enough capacity.
Yeah. Well, and we'll come back to some of this, but I do want to touch on, unfortunately, I'm not sure if you've read The Daycare Myth. It's a very popularized book right now, and Dan Worry does a really nice job at highlighting the business model for early learning child care and is not set up for any kind of profit margin. I think I may misquote this, but it's like 1 to 3%. And so when we continue to talk about the therapy services that you're able to provide here, that does make sense. So you probably had to make some budget decisions because there's limited funds. And that's unfortunate, and hopefully that can change as we continue to advocate for the need and importance of 0 to 3 and early learning and increasing those wages for early learning specialists. But at that time, it wasn't.
Professionalizing the role is really critical.
Yeah. And talking about roles, Teresa, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you over the past couple of months, and you come to this position from a different background. I do, but I do want to talk about how that's really led you and opened doors to get into some of the current work that you're doing. So sure, tell us a little bit about you and your background.
So I am Teresa Zwierzchowski, and I am the outreach and marketing specialist here at Help Me Grow Escambia, and I also do physician outreach. And I do come to this role from a very different background. I was not in childhood education or education at all. I was a journalist for nearly 20 years. That's what my background was. I came to the Pensacola News Journal back in 2001 and stayed there for almost 20 years. And doing that, I was able to just make so many connections within this community, learn how to speak to so many different audiences because no audience is the same, right? You speak to, people in one area the same way you speak to people in another area. They just have different needs and different, things that they want to discuss. And so that's really helped me, learn how to be in those different areas and different communities. We also, back then, when I first started, the internet was very new. It seems like it was very new. Chat rooms were very new.
I'm of that generation, so you're in good company.
Chat rooms were very new, and we had just gone through Hurricane Ivan, and then shortly after that, Gannett put into effect or into this new campaign. It was called Moms Like Me. And so each one of our papers had their own, and Pensacola Moms Like Me was what we had here, and I was a brand new mom. So that kind of threw me into, I was brand new at that time. So they threw me into that role. It was part of what I did. We got it off the ground. It really connected me with so many moms my age, moms older, moms younger. And it was a great way to kind of, looking back now, I can see there were so many things that we were going through together that moms today are still going through, premature birth and wondering if our child is developing correctly, all those different things. So it's really kind of helped me have some perspective today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to talk about some of your current initiatives and some headway that you've made in the pediatric space. So you talk about the different therapies that you have. What leads a family to your services? So talk to us about that process. How do they take advantage of some of the services that you have here?
So giving a little bit of background, we were what we refer to as an early intervention center. In Florida, Early Steps is the lead agency under the Department of Health Children's Medical Services for providing services to infants and toddlers up to the age of 3 who have identified developmental delays or diagnosed conditions. And so we were a community agency provider. Actually, before Early Steps existed, we were under Department of Developmental Services before that. Sacred Heart certainly was a good referral line. And as we were doing those services, we've always been concerned that we call them the kids are too old being referred, 2-year-old 6 months, a 2-year-old 10 months. And so we have always been trying to figure out how can we help find children earlier. And actually worked with a local interagency work group under Achieve Escambia to try and look at what are some of the solutions. And we came upon, in that research, Help Me Grow, which was a national organization founded by Dr. Paul Dworkin, a developmental pediatrician in Connecticut. And so we looked into it. Yes, Florida had to Help Me Grow. Florida is a multi-affiliate system where some are just a single affiliation, like you have the state office and they cover everything. That's the way it is in Alabama. But in Florida, different counties are funded to implement for your community. And so I contacted Help Me Grow Florida and was like, we would like to be a Help Me Grow in Escambia County and even Santa Rosa County if we could. And they were like, well, we have no additional funding presently, and the way to get funded is through the legislature or to get local funding. And so we worked with them on trying to build their campaign with the legislature to get additional funding, and that didn't come through. And so we started thinking, well, what else can we do? So through Achieve Escambia, we brought Dr. Dworkin to town and had a 3-day visit. One night was a dinner where he talked to business leaders in the community. The next day, we met with early childhood partners. And then that next evening, we had something for families to hear about the importance of early identification and all of us knowing about child development. So that kind of inspired us and, looked at, okay, every project that Achieve Escambia started looking at for kindergarten readiness was like, we need money. And so how could we get funding in our community? And that's when we actually put forth a plan for Achieve Escambia to get on the ballot in Escambia County for the citizens to vote on bringing a Children's Services Council. So I want to say it was 2019 that was on the ballot and passed through by 61%. And so some of the staffing that ended up being at what is now known as Escambia Children's Trust had been part of Achieve as well and known this history. So one of their priorities was knowing that we needed to Help Me Grow in Escambia County. So they created an invitation to bid. We applied for that, felt like it was a natural fit for us, having been the only early intervention agency in our community. And we did have some competition in that, but we were awarded the bid in March of 2023, and then we got to try and build it. And so that's been really exciting. We got our contract in July of 2023. And one of the beauties of our Children's Trust and knowing some of the information that led to that is I had been sharing information data that 13 to 15% of our population has an intellectual or developmental disabilities. So you would expect that many infants and toddlers would need early intervention services. And looking at the data in Escambia County, and throughout Florida, we were hitting that 4% of children. So we know we're missing about 10% of the population. And how can we find them? Help Me Grow seemed to be an answer to that through that focus on earlier identification through their 4 key components.
Right. And I want to talk about that just a little bit with you because you mentioned it earlier as well. As information spread, and so you were able to access funding and opportunities to really build your program. Now, in order to provide the services, you have to have funding there to retain staff, to entice qualified staff and retain that staff. So how do you balance being able to fund all the services that you provide, but then also knowing that we need to increase our reach? And then I want you to talk a little bit, Teresa, about increasing the reach. But, how do you navigate that? Because you do, know that statistically there are more children that need to be served. And our work, the Build a Brain, starting in the hospital, is really to inform. And we want to work alongside Help Me Grow and other agencies like the ELC. Anything that we can do to help raise that awareness of how should children be developing, the importance of those well baby visits. If your child's not developing in a particular area of growth, where are those services that can provide that support, whether that needs a formal evaluation and support services in place, or really just a touching base consultative. But how do you balance the need and being able to meet the need?
So one of the things we proposed, particularly since early steps, has their eligibility criteria has narrowed over the years. And so we know there are kids showing up at kindergarten not ready, but they hadn't qualified for early step services. And there'd been no services for them, yet they were showing developmental delays. And so we proposed in our funding proposal that we also include a component of developmental intervention. Being that allied help services, physical occupational speech therapy services, there's a shortage nationwide, just like there is in childcare. We have maintained over 100 children waiting for speech therapy on our services. And so one of the strategies we've done with having the trust be willing to fund that is we had a target of hiring 6 developmental specialists who have background in child development, early childhood special education, clinical social worker, any of those related areas. And so things go slower than when you're trying to build in something from new. I get to like 5 developmental specialists, and then one would have to leave. And the reasons many of them have left, had them to pursue better petty. Sure. And sometimes tearfully leaving because they love the work. And so we are, looking to balance that one of the shortage of allied help providers by providing the developmental intervention. And one of our strategies even is when we get a referral in our billing office, well, we can get you an evaluation within such and such a time frame. But to get in services, it'll probably be 6 months. But we have this other program called Help Me Grow, where child development specialists come to your home and work with you or go to your child's child care. And so it's been beautiful to be able to see that develop, and the family being it's like a little life vest for them because, having to wait in those 6 months, and we're preaching to you, early intervention is so important. In 6-month time frame, so much is happening in the child's brain that we want to capitalize on. So I think this next year we're going to get here to full staffing, but we're also needing to look at sustainability. Talking with Help Me Grow Florida, they've not gotten increased funding to add on new affiliates. We're one of 2 locally funded affiliates throughout the state. And so trying to make community aware. Tonight we actually have our the Children's Services board meeting where they're looking at our 3rd year funding, whether they will approve our budget. We're feeling very positive.
We'll send positive vibes that way. Well baby visits, all baby visits are important. Well baby visits are equally, if not more important in some regards, to catch those developmental delays. Oftentimes when a child may go to a pediatrician, whether that's a health clinic, private, that you may go for a particular need. And the pediatrician may not have an opportunity to talk about the importance of reading, singing, talking, playing. How many words is your child using in their everyday language? And so the well baby visits are a focused, intentional time for you able to have this conversation so that maybe mom, caregiver, and grandparent hasn't noticed things. And so we can elevate that conversation and then talk to us about what you're able to do in the health clinic and then how that process starts then as a result.
Sure. So what we've been doing, one of my roles is a physician outreach. And so I do go and speak with different physicians. We try and do some lunch and learns with them. We've met with the pediatric residents at Sacred Heart to explain the program to them and how we can help them. One of our most recent things we started doing is we're with Community Health Northwest Florida, going into each of their Escambia County offices with a resource table where we're providing material. We're capturing the people who are in the waiting room, talking about Help Me Grow. And then the next month, we will actually start screening within those areas. And then that way, we're able to educate those parents who are coming in maybe for the well baby visit. The pediatrician, can directly refer to us there and say, hey, if you have a concern, Teresa's here, developmental specialist is here, they can go ahead and do that screening. And so we've been really fortunate that they've allowed us to come into the different facilities they have currently. We're in Trinity up the road, and then we're also at Community Health Northwest Florida on Jackson Street. We go to C.A. Weiss, the community health clinic there. And we just recently started going to Century, which was fantastic because they have so few resources in that area, and being able to go and work with Dr. Stewart, who is in that office, they've been fantastic with making sure we're scheduled to come on days where they have a lot of well AD visits. And we're able to provide that additional help to them and say, hey, we can screen, we can do this. If the parent has questions, please send them to us. And she has also sent us several referrals since she found out about us.
Right.
They didn't even know that we were there. And once I met with her one day, and within 2 days, we had 4 referrals. And 2 of them, I believe, are starting services soon. And she's like, we don't have this fear. And I'm like, that is why I'm here, to help you and to teach you about what we do. And so we've been just going to the different ones to try to get the word out.
Yeah, I love that. I started using the term be a bridge, not a barrier. Someone else may have said that before, but I'm wanting that as my own. And we talk a lot in communities about access to resources, and while that is still a great need, it's also knowing that you need access to resources. And we work with a lot of families. That child may not be in other social settings, and so you're not able to kind of calibrate, my child is developing at a different rate than their peers. Going back to the awareness piece and just making it a safe place for us to say, hey, I think something's wrong. And I think that I see a shift in that as we talk more about changing names. You talked about the R word earlier. I've been in education. I started teaching in 93. And so things have changed since that time. I started as kindergarten teacher. But also we use words like neurodivergent. I think that we are becoming as a community a little more accepting of those differences along a continuum. And I hope that helps in this space for families to say, hey, I need some validation here or some support here because I'm not quite sure, and not as a reflection of parenting. I know I was a parent years ago. I still don't care, but raising young children years ago. So it's been a minute. But we have a tendency as a parent to see our children's behavior as a reflection of ourselves, because we feel like that's a negative or an inadequacy. Do you see that sometimes?
I do. And I think one of the things with my background, being able just to have the communication skills and going out, talk to different people. If I'm at an event, I can really, truly, and being a mom who was concerned about my child, like she walked late, and I was concerned about that because a peer of hers who was the exact same age was running. My child is barely standing up. And I would ask my pediatrician, babe, is there something we need to do? And it was you know what, we're going to wait. But she's still young. We'll wait and see. Well, had we been able to screen that, I would have seen it. She's fine. She's perfectly where she needs to be. And I see that a lot. And I hear that question a lot. And so I'm able to tell that story to parents out in the community. Listen, this has happened. I was stayed in. My child isn't speaking. My child is, not doing the same thing her brother did or her sister did. What can we do? And that's where Help Me Grow can come in and kind of say, well, let's just do a little screening. We'll see where they are. Alleviate those fears. And just being able to kind of connect and resonate with what they're going through has been extremely helpful.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned, and we've all had children, and if you had one child, right? All develop very differently. And, sometimes as a parent, we would like to be able to control that, but thank goodness we can't, right? Or I wouldn't have the beautiful children that they grow up to be. But again, just providing that safety net to say, hey, we are going to wait and see, but we've done a screening to validate that, right? I know in education, and there's a lot of work to be done, but I think teachers as a whole have taken a wait and see approach sometimes in a way that wasn't beneficial, right? We just didn't know enough, right? Know better, do better. And so I think in education, we are looking to be more proactive and follow that developmental, neurological development with learning to read and write. And so if we can kind of layer that on our families to get the assessment or the screener and then have the information and then decide it's a wait and see and not.
We've really been trying to promote verbiage check and see. And
Check and see. I like that.
yeah, like that way we can check where your child's development is. And actually, through our care coordination, if things are looking great, she can send you developmental activities to do to continue to have that child on the continuum to stay in that developmental trajectory. But then if there are the concerns, we either help them get connected to early steps, to Child Find, or to our developmental. Another key keys to our outreach is child care, early learning centers in our community. A lot of them do some developmental screenings, but some have not had the training to tell them exactly why they're doing it or the quality of it. And you're not just checking marks down to the sheet. So we've also, Teresa's organized some events where we'll go at pickup time in the evening when parents and do what we call a mini books, balls, and blocks. And we advertise it like a week or so in advance. They sign up for slots. And at one center, we found 10 children that wanted further intervention.
Yeah, so going to them has been one of your strategies. Thank you for sure. That you're out there, you're visible, and we use the word saturate, just saturate the community. And earlier you mentioned when, correct me with the name, who started Help Me Grow,
Dr. Dworkin.
when he came down to working, you talked about 3 specific events with business leaders, with early learning specialists, childcare, and with families. And I really liked that. It goes back to your role and your experiences, Teresa. This is a community thing. This isn't just for a family with young children. It's not just for our preschool teachers. This work greatly benefits the entire community. When you think our company, Build a Brain, Build a Life, Build a Community, is really about that. If we can build that brain in the first couple of years and make sure that everything that's available to them can be provided, we build a potential for life. And that goes back to our community. So I like the
Built our workforce. It really
does.
because children who aren't ready for kindergarten then fall behind 3rd grade reading, 7th grade math, high school graduation, and then are not ready for the workforce. And so that earlier intervention can potentially change that for
Absolutely.
for singing.
It changes lives. As a human for the child.
Even looking at the population of children who have diagnosed conditions, having been in this work for 39 years, I think back, I had an uncle with Down syndrome, and he, for many years, lived in an institution. His greatest independence was when he got out of the institution and lived in a group home and loved it and got to do outings. And, while that makes me so sad for his life, now I've seen one young lady that I think of in particular who was an infant when I first started with our program, went through different initiatives with school, did some private school education and different things. I graduated high school, local high school, in special ed track, but she was always very outgoing, very personable, loves fashion. And so we got a legislative allocation to start an adult program called Program for Adult Learning and Support. And that was a partnership with Pensacola State College. And so some of these adults who qualified, met the skill sets for participation, they're able to get an adaptive education post-secondary, but also look at some of their interests. And hers was in cosmetology. And Pensacola State College had a course she was able to take where she actually got graduated with her AA as an esthetician. She also, now remember I said she has Down syndrome, ended up taking the state licensure and passed that test to become a licensed esthetician and works at a spa here in town. And is also married now, living independently.
Oh, wow. So we're developing agency. I love that. I love that. So you've been in this skill for a while. So as we kind of get to the end, what do you see that's been a consistent over the years? It continues to be something that you're focused on. It's been a common thing for 10, 15, 20 years.
That we are identifying too late to make that greatest impact long term. And the other, I think, is the beauty of collaboration. When we can bring cross sectors together, we are so much stronger in helping families.
Yeah. And Teresa, I'll pitch this question to you. Coming into this space, what has caught you off guard? You're like, I had no idea about this.
Oh gosh, the early intervention. MaryAnn has taught me so much about how if you can catch, some of these, developmental delays so early, the changes that you can make. Yeah. I never even thought about it, and just learning about it, it's like, oh my gosh, yes, this makes sense. Let's make sure that we're capturing these kids and getting them to where they need to be.
And why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we invest our time, energy, resources in that? Because it does, have a ripple effect with our economic growth, our community growth, and really just the potential for a life. Correct. Absolutely. And so as we talk to and share this among our community, I'll ask 2 questions, community and then parents. What would you say to other communities that are listening to this, learning about Help Me Grow, just listening to your story and the work that you're doing? What can others advocate for or, consider?
There's such a breadth of it's such a quality program that was created nationally and then, brought to the States. The training and component and the ongoing supports, there's consistent call and check-ins that you can do, and the national office is continually creating other opportunities for learning and partnerships with other national organizations, promoting that collaboration. Get an initiative, find a cheerleader in your community. We certainly had the support, Mr. Studer, the gentleman with the nursery, Julia McQueen, who became voices for our campaign as well. And so, find some cheerleaders. We have a couple of physician champions as well.
Yeah, we created a meet, and one of those, she's dynamic.
And so making your community more aware and putting that data out there, having, a creator to career initiative that you can pull all of those partners together. Just heard a few weeks ago in a child care summit in Miami, that's the same thing they're talking about, is the collaboration of pulling people together and what impact they're making.
Making some great work. Yeah, I'm sure we're jealous there together. Yeah, I learned a lot from that collective impact piece. Absolutely. In the data, getting your voice out there. I worked in school improvement for a number of years, and we would say that we were data rich and information poor. And that's something that, as I work with nurses and you work with community leaders, it's really important that we lay our assumptions aside when we're talking to the parent, and that we have an awareness that the parents that we work with have different lived experiences. And so we may have data points about a particular zip code or a lifestyle or, we name it. But at the end of the day, these are families and children, and we can take that data, but we have to add information and action items to that if you're going to make a change. So
And so many, I think back to the early years in my career, and the agencies were all siloed and very protective of, and there's still some of that exists, but the beauty of collaboration is such a key piece. Meeting the business sector as well as the educators, our school district partnering with us. Some of the other pieces we're doing, one is focused on supporting parents. We had training called Parent Cafe this past November from Be Strong Families, and I was able to recruit participants from 6 different organizations in our community. And as a result of that, we've been able to join folks in the initiative called Help Me Grow Escambia, where they're targeting 2 of the schools in the highest poverty area with the lowest school grades to see what we can do to help. And so we propose to do that family engagement component through use of Parent Cafe. And, just like starting off, building Help Me Grow, it's like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? So we had, advertised, did all kinds of things to make it sound fun. First 2 sessions, 1 parent showed up, 2 parents showed up. Yesterday we had 6 show up, and those 6 have agreed to bring others because they're what Parent Cafe does is it kind of breaks down the barrier of feeling vulnerable. And as Teresa was talking earlier, having that parent-to-parent connection is so critical. It's like sometimes, you feel isolated or like there's no adults for me to even talk to. And so it gives that outlet. It can reduce the potential for abuse and neglect. There are a multitude of protective factors that this has proven to strengthen families if we can partner together. Right?
Well, in that support system, it may not show up in that first year's postpartum depression, but we know working with families, you do have children that have developmental delays or need supportive services. Sometimes that can be isolating, yes, and feeling very siloed in that journey. So just creating a network of support can also minimize, that in the mental health needs that couple raising a child that has needs.
Thank you for listening to The Critical Window. If today's episode sparked new ideas or insights, we'd love for you to subscribe and share it with others. Visit buildabrainnow.com for show notes and resources and to connect with our growing community. Until next time, remember, every interaction shapes a developing brain.